Good morning. So, in this one today, I'm going to kind of go over um, some of the things that I've been learning from a course I've been taking. And so, this is to help you to overcome and to heal from being in a relationship with a psychological manipulator, narcissist, psychopath, sociopath, active addict, sex addict, porn addict. Usually, narcissists are also sex and porn addicts, so there's a lot of the comorbidity. Not always, but it's very common. So if you're getting out of one of these relationships, your degree or level of shock is probably going to be correlated with how progressive the psychological manipulator's sort of disorder was, because these character disturbed people, like it's progressive, whether it's a personality disorder or an addiction. Either way, it gets progressively worse, especially if they're with the one target, because they will get worse and more. The devaluation, the demeaning, it gets worse within in the context of that relationship, right? Because there's a part of them that, from what I've read, or I think there's a part of them that's so insecure inside that basically if anyone loves them, they have no respect for that person because they internally know or think that they're unlovable. At least that's what the narcissist, from what I've read. So your degree of shock is probably going to be correlated with that, with their behaviors, how bad they got, where you were, that there was something seriously wrong with them. And then two, your ability to see what was really happening, right? And your sort of blinders. What were your blinders like? Were you able to see that their actions were not matching their words? Like, were you onto them? Were you starting to see this? Were you starting to discover that there's a double life, that they have a secret sex life, that they have a porn sex addiction? Like, were you able to see this, or were you sort of in denial or delusion? Or maybe they were just really, really good at it, so they duped you. I mean, all of these are possible, and usually it's a lot of sort of variables intertwined here. So your level of shock is probably going to be somewhat correlated with that. So for instance, if you were with a covert narcissist, their mask was very good, they were very high level, they were very sneaky, and under the radar, you might have gone a long time with them. You might have been in a long-term relationship and totally thought this one thing when this other thing was in fact true. You thought that they were this person when in fact they were this person. You might have even thought that they had some of the coverts send like a really, really good mask. So you might have thought that they had like even a higher level of integrity than normal people. Like you thought they were like good as gold, like the honest Boy Scout. And then you may have found out about their double life, their infidelity, their secret sex life, their porn addiction, their going to strip clubs, prostitutes, massage parlors, hookups, maybe even same-sex hookups. Like all of these things might have happened and you're like absolutely in shock, right? So that's possible that you might be in intense shock. And that can be part of this process, right? And then the other thing is you might not be in shock because you may have been started to be aware of these behaviors. And so maybe you've just stayed in knowing that this stuff was going on, right? Either is possible. But the course that I'm taking talks about when you start going through the grief process, the normal grief process. If you're a neurotypical, you're going to have bargaining, sadness, anger, frustration, grief. Like all of this is going to be part of the grief process, and eventually you're going to come to acceptance, but that can take a long time, especially if you were with a extreme personality disordered individual, somebody with a big character disturbance, right? So it may take you a long time to sort of heal from this, right, to get to acceptance. But part of it is so you're going through that process, you're having normal human emotions. You were probably brainwashed in the relationship to think that any sign of you having emotions was like a problem, was you being like overly emotional. Of course, that's more of the gaslighting. I'm going to suggest that you consider that the manipulator is actually the outlier because they do not have normal human emotions. You can tell that by how they quickly discard their children as stepchildren and wife or husband, and just roll into another relationship with no breaks, no healing, no gaps. Usually there's almost always infidelity and cheating. Like, that is not healthy. That is not what healthy adults do. That is not what emotionally healthy people do. But that is what narcs do, and that's what they did in all their past relationships. You'll find out there's no gaps. They don't have any gaps. They're just always like rolling into the next one because they cannot be alone. In order for them, if they were alone, because they tend to, especially the narcissist, they tend to self-regulate by being with someone else. So they are in that position of acting like calm, cool, and collected, right? But they can only sort of maintain that sort of superiority if they have a victim that's in a relationship with them to be the inferior. If a narcissist is by themselves, who do they get to be superior to, right? So it's all part of their toxic dance. In fact, they say narcissists and avoidance are more often in relationships than the sort of codependent sort of love addicts. Because sometimes, a lot of times the victims of these relationships, they will take breaks and they will heal in between the relationship with the narcissist and before dating again, because they are, they need to heal, they need to get well, and that's what they do, or they need to do their work. They're able to like self-reflect and do some personal growth and like look at their part, which is usually like could be like codependent behaviors. But the course I'm taking talks about, he says, when you're in the middle of that heartbreak, when you're feeling all that pain, look back on the relationship and ask yourself, do I really miss this person? And if so, what percentage of my sort of pain is about missing that person, right? And he came up with about 10%. I can say for me, it's probably 3%. I mean, because I was with somebody who was like a blank, like a really sort of boring individual, didn't have their own self. So I was with a ghost. So when I look back, I'm like, what do I miss? Like, I don't know. That person didn't even have like their own. They were like a hologram. I mean, yeah, they did fun things with me that I like organized everything, and so. I mean, in a way, it was just sort of like being with myself, because they just sort of, mirror you, and like they don't really have their own self. And so I can't even, I look back and I'm like, I can't even say who, it was like a ghost. I mean, that's seriously when I look back, it's like, I don't know what to miss. There was nothing unique or individual about that person to miss, right? So, and I realize that's going to vary. Some of the overt narcissists have a much stronger sort of defined personality. But when you look back, you're like, okay, what part of this problem that I'm having, this grief, is actually missing that human that I was with, or that person? And it's probably going to be a pretty small percentage, especially if you were with a sociopath or a covert narcissist, where they just mirror you. They don't really have their own personality, or they don't have a core self, right? Or they don't show it if they do, right? Because their core is actually pretty ugly, so they don't show that. So notice this. So let's say 10% is missing, that person, and you miss the times you had, or you think about them. There was something about their personality that stood out for you. I can't say that's the case for me, but for some people that may be the case, right? You look back and you're like, oh, I miss this about them, or I miss this that we did, or I miss that, right? But then look at the other 90%. What's there, right? What is in that 90%? If the 10% is you're missing that person, there's some heartbreak around that sadness, you miss them. What's the 90%? Well, the 90% is most likely, or in my case, like 98%, is most likely missing the fantasy of what you thought they were, or what you thought your future was. So it's missing like this future fantasy of how you thought things were going to look, right? And you wouldn't be in a relationship, a marriage, or whatever with someone unless you had like if you're a neurotypical, unless you had like ideas of a future together and how it was going to be. Clearly, if you were with a narcissist, they have a really hard time or sociopath even thinking about a future, because they don't live that way. They don't plan. They're not future planners in terms of like a future with someone together. They know they know their house of cards is gonna crumble at some point, right? So they're not really planners in terms of like a future. So I guess I'm going off on a tangent there, but like in general, like you're missing the fantasy of what you thought you had or what the future might have been, right? And what I'm going to encourage you to do is recognize that and notice that, and then start to figure out what kind of future that you want to have for you, independent of any other human being. Independent, I mean, obviously, if you have children, they are a huge part of that, but like independent of, the toxic person. Like, what do you want your future to look like? Like, for me, and I wrote down a list, and really, I mean, my hopes and dreams haven't changed that much because I still had such a sort of strong personality that I had my well-defined hopes and dreams when I was in the relationship, with the manipulator. And I still have a lot of those same ones, but I'm also like, this big thing is opened up where I'm like, oh, I have this whole new future that's opened up to all sorts of possibilities that I really hadn't even thought about while I was in the relationship with the manipulator. And so, like, it could look like this for you. Like, I wrote down a list, and I'm like, I'm going to climb big mountains. And in order to do that, the small steps is, I climb every day. I've been trying to climb every single day. I've been going to the bouldering gym. I've been going to the climbing gym. I've been climbing outside. And I've developed all these wonderful new relationships with, with new people in my life that are, awesome climbers. And some of them were in my life before, but some of them are new. And so I'm really developing I'm getting my passion back for rock climbing. And so that's been really great for me. And I have a list of specific mountains that I want to climb. And it's a cool list. I've been doing research on the mountains, and I'm excited, right? So that'll help you to start getting back in touch with sort of the things that make you happy, that you're passionate about, right? So, and then other things you can do, whatever your future dreams are. Do you want to travel? If so, start making a list of the places you want to travel. If this all sounds too pie in the sky, you can start small. You can be like, do I want to get this other job that I've been thinking about? Or perhaps, maybe I'm going to go back to graduate school and I'm going to get a degree in another field that I hadn't thought about, or I've always wanted to and I just have stopped myself. Or, maybe you're going to start working at, in a theater. Maybe you're going to start acting or doing plays, or you're going to join a book group where you're writing and you're interacting with, fellow writers, or, whatever your sort of, ideas and dreams are. Start to really cultivate those, and start to make some lists. Put it where it's very visible, where you can see them. And it doesn't have to be goal lists. It can just be these are my dreams, these are my future plans. And really start to try to redefine your future and let go of the fantasy and start living in reality, but also with your dreams, and reinvigorate, recharge yourself by focusing on, what are some of the things that you want to do in your life in terms of your dreams and goals. And I've said this a lot, but I really think it's important that you take some time off between the relationship with the manipulator before you get into a new relationship. I'm not suggesting that you can't date a little bit to sort of figure things out, but I really think for me anyway, I think it's really important that I address my codependent behaviors, which I've been doing aggressively. I've been doing a lot of work around the codependence, including going to Codependence Anonymous. Got a sponsor in that program. I've been working those steps, as well as reading a lot of different books. One I've read a lot is The Human Magnet Syndrome by Ross Rosenberg. And then this is another one I've been reading recently. It's called Attached. And it is all about the new science of adult attachment and how it can help you find and keep love. And this is really good because it's talking about your attachment style, whether you're insecure, avoidant, or secure. And a lot of people that find themselves in relationships with narcissists, they have insecure attachment. That is not your fault, had nothing to do with you. It had to do from 0 to 5, your parents, and they did the best they could, but for whatever reason, you may have developed an insecure attachment. And typically, the narcissist has avoidant attachment. And that, again, in a way, it's not their fault either because it happens 0 to 5, right? So this is just some of the stuff that I've been really digging deep into my childhood trauma and to healing from it and to recognizing, why I had blinders on in the relationship, like where my codependent behaviors allowed me to make excuses for super bad behaviors or toxic behaviors or abusive behaviors or neglect or gaslighting, cheating, like all of this stuff. I kept making these excuses. And, that is a totally normal person with really healthy boundaries and secure attachment probably wouldn't even be in a relationship with a manipulator because they would see the red flags and they would avoid them. So I am working on developing secure attachment for myself so that I never get into a relationship with somebody like this, so I can see the red flags, so I can do enough work on my own self and my own codependent blind spots so that I'm able to notice when I'm being manipulated and, exit that relationship or don't even get into it. Be very, very slow about dating people and really see what their character is. Like, do they have a good character? Do they have integrity? Do they have honesty? Are they faithful? Do they value monogamy? Do their actions or their words match their actions? And all of this, you can see this, especially if you wait before having any sort of physical intimacy, because if you have the physical intimacy with the psychological manipulator and you have anxious attachment, you're going to bond. And that bonding, it could be be careful who you bond with. Like, I want to bond with somebody who has like a really good moral compass. They have a high level of integrity. They value the same things I do: kindness, decency, helping others, service. Their values are not just like pleasure, sex, and money. Like, I want somebody that has a strong core, a strong sense of self. They know who they are. They're spiritually seeking. They're spiritually grounded. They believe in a higher power. They're doing their work. They're not engaged in active addiction of alcohol, drugs, sex, porn, or addiction to validation and supply. I want to be with somebody who has their shit together, really. And so in order to, sort of attract that, I have to do my work, and I have to get to the place where I am, at peace with myself and loving myself enough to know that I deserve to be with somebody awesome. So that's all part of the journey that you can do when you get out of these relationships. But I don't think you're going to be able to do it if you hop right back into another relationship. And typically, if you get out of a relationship with a narc or sociopath, psychopath, active addict, you might have, especially with narcissists, you have a proclivity to sink or slip right back into another one. And you might not even know that they're a narcissist because you might have been with an overt and then you find yourself with a covert, or you might have been with a covert and then you find yourself with an overt, or you might, find yourself in a relationship with a active sex addict or any of these things. So I think it's super important that you do your healing, you do your growth, you work on yourself so that you can heal and be a totally whole person before you try to establish like another long-term sort of relationship or a really committed relationship. So I don't know if this helps you, but this is just some stuff that I've been learning and I'm working on that I'm trying to share my journey with you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.